Lana Del Rey let that Grammy go to her head, and she didn't even win it. Hi, and welcome back to me talking about whatever I want. Today I want to talk about Lana Del Rey because she had a lot of statements about society, and as somebody who lives in a society, I have a lot to say about those statements. But first, of course, I'd like to do my comment shout out. This shout out actually goes out to Ali, who says, "It feels like it's been 5 years since you posted a video, but who's counting?" It honestly does feel like it's been 5 years. Full disclosure, after all the absolute garbage that happened in my last two videos, I was not in the frame of mind to make good content, so I just stopped. I took a 1 month break, and y'all would not believe it was just the most refreshing period of my life. But I wasn't just sleeping on that break. I know y'all see this camera quality right here. I know you see this new PC that I'm editing my videos on. I got knocked down, and I'm just coming back stronger than ever. But at the same time, I'm actually not back. I'm, after this video, probably gonna take another 1 month break. I just wanted to break up the break kind of at the halfway point, just so I could make something nice and lighthearted for you to watch. And because I really wanted to talk about the topic in this video. I'm also gonna do one more video before I go back on my break, and that's gonna go on my other channel, and it's gonna be about Micah Stauffer, that lady who gave her kid back after making a bunch of sponsorship money off of him. But that's that video. This video, we're talking about Lana Del Rey. So for those of you who might not know who Lana Del Rey is, she's an American musician. She debuted around 2010-ish, and she's released 6 albums so far. Some of those albums are even platinum, like Born to Die. She's really popular. Even if you don't listen to her, there's a high chance you probably still have heard her voice, if anything, just on the remix of her smash hit Summertime Sadness. Her music's pretty unique, you know, it covers dark themes like toxic relationships, depression, stuff like that. But she does it through this sound that's very reminiscent of, like, you know, 40s, 50s, 60s. Her whole aesthetic is kind of taken from like vintage films and literature. I think it's nice, it's nice. But one thing you have to understand is she's not quite your average run-of-the-mill alternative singer, because Lana Del Rey is a very polarizing figure. She's been criticized just to an insane degree. Some of that criticism is not that serious, like, you know, her horrible SNL performance. I was like, no, please stay here. I promise you she can sing better than that. But then again, some of the criticism she receives is actually very serious, like people who say her music is dangerous for young listeners, which personally I think is a ridiculous argument. But at the same time, it's important to note that she's also been praised just kind of universally. She's won a ton of accolades for her work. People consider her to be, you know, one of the most talented songwriters out there. Basically, the tide of public opinion has turned in her favor, and that kind of peaked with the release of her album last year, Norman effing Rockwell. Through it all, though, she's had a very strong connection with her fans, which is good and bad, because some of them are just delusional, and that's kind of what we're running into in this video. Now, for the record, I don't think all Lana Del Rey fans are delusional, because I'm really about to admit this on camera. I'm a Lana Del Rey fan. I'm not here to cancel her. I've never canceled anyone on my channel before. But look, Cherry, her song, is literally in my top 2017 plays. For years, I've been listening to her music and hyping her up kind of behind the scenes. So I'm going to be fully honest, when she came out with these recent statements that we're going to be going over today, I was a little bit surprised. So what did she say? Why are we making this video? Why are so many people talking about it? Well, Miss Del Rey posted this statement right here to her Instagram, pretty much just out of the blue. As you could see, there's a lot to unpack. It made a lot of people angry. It made a lot of people agree with her, but it sparked a lot of backlash. I'm not talking about some people were mad on Twitter. This was in the national news. Everybody on YouTube was talking about it. The post itself currently has over 150,000 comments. She wound up causing such a wave of backlash that before I get into that, I just want to give my own opinion of her statement based off of just this statement. Even though it's long, she made 6 main points. That's not 6 fingers. She made 6 main points, so I'm going to go over those 6 points and kind of just give the pros and cons of what I think about each one, because she did have some good points, but as you're about to see, there's also some stuff in here that's just weird. But I have time, and I know you have time. You clicked into a video this long. Thank you, by the way. Behold my dramatic reading of her statement, in which I just use the same voice I used for literally everything. I don't care about it that much. Question for the culture. Now that Doja Cat, Ariana, Camila, Cardi B, Kalani, and Nicki Minaj, and Beyonce have had number ones with songs about being sexy, wearing no clothes, freaking, cheating, etc., can I please go back to singing about being embodied, feeling beautiful by being in love even if the relationship is not perfect, or dancing for money, or whatever I want, without being crucified or saying that I'm glamorizing abuse? Okay. So point one, other artists make songs about cheating and other things, and they're popular, so can she please go back to making her art without being, criticized so heavily for glamorizing abuse? On its own, that's kind of a good point. I mean, no, the heart of it is definitely true. I wholeheartedly agree that making art about controversial topics does not mean that you are glorifying or glamorizing controversial topics. And she has every right to speak up about that. On the negative side, why is she naming like 6 different artists? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 different artists. There's no way she posted that without knowing that it was just gonna make everyone really upset. And that's because she describes their music in such just a really reductive and kind of rude way. Like, they make songs about cheating and taking your clothes off, but then she goes on to describe her music as about being embodied and in love. And it's like, you literally just hyped yourself up and put these people down at the same time. A lot of Lana Del Rey's fans were like, she didn't put them down, like she didn't come for them. Honestly though, like if I'm like, now that Drew Gooden, Cody Ko, and Curtis Connor have all made videos about weird Amazon products, can I please go back to making my videos about serious topics and important coverage without being accused of being negative? Okay, maybe I have a point with that statement, but at the same time, why am I coming after Cody? He didn't do anything. I'm just using those 3 as examples because I literally love all of their content. So yeah, I'm just gonna be honest, that was weird, and seeing as that was the very first paragraph, it sets a really weird tone because it comes across like she's not jealous, but she does mention that all of these artists are number 1, but at the same time they're not all number 1 because Camila Cabello, she hasn't had a number 1 song this year. Kehlani has never had a number 1 in her life, even though that's robbery and she deserves it, but that's not what this video is about. Overall, it's a bad comparison. Now that these people are popular, can I go back to not being criticized over this unrelated issue? There's no correlation. I'm fed up with female writers and alternative singers saying that I glamorized abuse when in reality, I'm just a glamorous person singing about the realities of what we are all now seeing are very prevalent emotionally abusive relationships all over the world. Alright, so point 2, female writers and singers often miscategorize her description of events as her promoting those events. On the positive side, I definitely think that she's right. I do see a lot of people saying Lana Del Rey is responsible for the problems that she sings about, which is ridiculous. So I'm really glad that she's speaking up about that because someone had to say it. I guess my only nitpick is I'm just a glamorous person is the cringiest statement I've ever read in my entire life today. But at the same time, I have literally no room to talk because I too am just a glamorous person. With all of the topics women are finally allowed to explore, I just want to say over the last 10 years, I think it's pathetic that my minor lyrical exploration detailing my sometimes submissive or passive roles in my relationships has often made people say I've set women back hundreds of years. Alright, so point 3. It's not right that she's been called a detriment to women's rights just because she's been honest about her experiences as a woman and those experiences are different from other people's. That's kind of deep. Honestly, I have nothing to say about that. It was like worded perfectly and I totally get her point. But I find it weird that seeing as this is her main issue, why did she need to name the artist in the beginning? Why are we talking about number 1s? And it's a little weird. It really should have just been her full statement. I don't think anyone would have gotten mad at her if this was the whole statement. But unfortunately, the rest of this is just kind of her digging a hole in the ground and then proceeding to jump into it. Let this be clear. I'm not a feminist, but there has to be a place in feminism for women who look and act like me. The kind of woman who says no, but men hear yes. The kind of women who are slated mercilessly for being their authentic, delicate selves. The kind of women who get their own stories and voices taken away from them by stronger women or by men who hate women. Okay, so point 4, she's not an anti-feminist, but she feels feminism is intolerant of more delicate women who get talked over by other people. That's what she's saying, right? I don't think that's me, mischaracterizing her statement. But at the same time, what is she talking about? I guess I don't understand how you could claim to be more delicate than other people. Like, how does that work? Also, she, at the end of that statement, lists strong women and men who hate women in like the same category as people who talk over her. And doing that directly after claiming to be more delicate than other people has super weird implications. Also, I have to point out, I'm not a feminist is terrible wording, and like 95% of the people I saw react to that misread it as I'm not a feminist. And I'm talking about smart people that I follow and love, and I know they know how to read. I was about to say they know reading. I don't know reading, but they know. Why not just say I'm a feminist? You know what I mean? I know a lot of her fans were like, it's a double negative, obviously. And yes, I understand double negatives are important for emphasis, but this is coming from a woman who's claimed point blank she doesn't care about feminism. Someone who said, and I quote, "Whenever people bring up feminism, I'm like, God, I'm just really not that interested." I can understand why people are thinking she's writing, I'm not a feminist. Also, the whole idea that feminism needs space for women who look and act like her. Have you looked at yourself? Feminism has always had space for women who look like Lana Del Rey. Let's just be completely honest. And lastly, just my input as a man. The kind of woman who says no, but men hear yes. That's not a kind of woman. That's a kind of man. Like, that's the same argument I hear people use when they try to blame women for bad things happening to them. I think it's important to push back against that because there is no kind of woman who says no and men hear yes. That's just 100% gonna be on the man. You know what I mean? Overall, that was a weird statement, and epic cringe, bro. I've been honest and optimistic about the challenging relationships I've had. Newsflash, that's how it is for many women, and that was sadly my experience up until the point that those records were made. So I just want to say it's been a long 10 years of BS reviews up until recently, and I've learned a lot from them, but I also feel it really paved the way for other women to stop putting on a happy face and to just be able to say whatever the hell they wanted to in their music. Unlike my experience, where if I even expressed a note of sadness in my first two records, I was deemed literally hysterical as though it was literally the 1920s. Okay, so I guess point 5, she's saying she's just been singing about her experiences, and even though that's led to her getting shamed and criticized, by doing so, she's paved the way for others to do the same. The positives of that, I'm glad that she has continued to just stick up for what she wants to do in the face of criticism. And I'm also glad that she recognizes the space has changed a bit and it is much more accepted, to tell your story. On the flip side though, just I paved the way for other women to say whatever they want in their music. For any one person to claim that is insane, but I think especially somebody who debuted as late as 2010, like by the time 2010 rolled around, the way had been paved by all the other artists that came. It's the artists that Lana Del Rey tries to sound like on her albums. Those are the ones who paved the way. Like, that's just a very martyrish and self-important stance to assume. I could definitely understand why people reacted negatively to it. I feel like if anything, she more so paved the way for her listeners, to speak up and not have to put on a happy face and all that stuff. That makes sense, but claiming that, you've had that kind of impact on the music industry as a whole, I'm not sure about it. Anyways, none of this has anything to do about much, but I'll be detailing some of my feelings in my next 2 books of poetry, mostly the second one, with Simon & Schuster. Yes, I'm still making personal reparations with the proceeds of the book to my choice of Native American foundations, which I'm very happy about, and I'm sure there will be tinges of what I've been pondering in my new album that comes out September 5th. Thanks for reading. Happy quarantining. Alright, so that was her last point, and I know some of y'all saw it coming. Y'all saw it coming, right? You saw the album plug coming. So point 6 is she's going to talk about this more in her upcoming 2 books and her album, which comes out September 5th. And also she donates to Native American people, apparently. On the one hand, I think that's kind of inspiring that this lady has enough material to work with for 2 entire books and a full-length album That's crazy. And another positive thing is it's never a bad thing to donate. Like, it's really good that she's donating to these causes. But on the other hand, wow, this statement just really puts this whole thing into context, doesn't it? Now, all of a sudden, the random name dropping is just, it makes complete sense. She got the attention of millions of people with the drama that she's bringing to the table. And then she ends the same statement with an announcement for her album. And this is literally the first time she's announced the date for her new album too. Honestly, that's kind of impressive. Also, I have to point out, mentioning the charity at the end is super weird. Like, as I said, I'm not into donation shaming. If you donate $2 or $2 million, you did the right thing. But mentioning it at weird times, I'm totally into shaming, because it's like, why is that relevant to this conversation in any context other than the fact that you're trying to use it to deflect criticism? But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. So that was a statement, y'all. Face value. Honestly, my personal opinion about it, it's fine. It's not that bad. Like, it's worded terribly, and I think if you don't read it graciously, you will definitely pick up negative vibes. I think even me admitting that it's an okay statement, I also have to concede that it has negative energy all over it, especially with the comparisons and the weird statements about feminism. But was it worth her getting canceled over on Twitter? No, nothing is really. But I also think it's important to note she wasn't just getting canceled on Twitter. You know, people like to pretend, oh my gosh, they're getting all this hate because people were just mad for no reason. No, I was reading these tweets. People had some really, really good points. So I picked 4 tweets out of this storm to illustrate what people were saying at the heart of it. I don't know who was giving Lana Del Rey a hard time, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't black women. Now, if you're wondering how this happened, she did compare herself to a group of mainly black women, which I didn't cross my mind the first time I read the post, but looking back, is interesting. I don't really agree with this post though, because I don't feel that Lana Del Rey was saying these people gave her a hard time and they're responsible for her criticism. But at the same time, it's really hard to decide what Lana Del Rey was saying at all, so I can understand why people are interpreting it. This tweet says, Lana Del Rey really threw a bunch of black women under the bus before saying that feminism needs to accommodate women like her. This I do agree with, because when I read her say feminism needs space for women like me, I knew they were going to come after her. I knew they were going to drag her, whether it's about race or not. She did mention like 7 different artists and then proceeded to work very hard to distinguish herself as being different from them. Like, it has very, I'm not like other girls energy. And the thing is, she kind of is like the other girls, because Kehlani specifically, I listened to her album after reading that post because I was curious, and her last album, It Was Good Until It Wasn't, is literally about assuming a passive role in a toxic relationship. It's a great album, by the way. You should listen to it if you're bored. But when you look at how the only difference between like Kehlani's album and some of Lana Del Rey's album are just the vernacular and the beats, her comparison does start seeming like it has undertones of her thinking she's better than them for reasons other than the ones she disclosed. I can admit that, and I can also admit that that's not what she explicitly said. You know what I mean? This third tweet right here says, the optics of Lana, a white woman, complaining about feminism lacking space for her while critiquing the acclaim allotted to several black pop artists is mortifying. I mean, this tweet is very hard to disagree with. I like that this person mentioned optics specifically, because that's just like a whole realm of PR where you work hard to make sure that things aren't coming across the way you don't intend them. Not because people are dumb or like because you want to censor yourself, but just because so much of this could have been avoided with some extra clarity. I also really like that this person mentioned she critiqued the acclaim allotted to those artists, because that's kind of absolutely what she did. She really didn't need to mention that they all have #1. So it just makes her sound really bitter. This last tweet I want to read says, I think Lana's post would have been fine if she hadn't compared herself to a group of mostly black women with the clear tone that she thinks she's been treated worse by the media, when that's observably untrue. And yes, I also agree with that. Even if, again, it wasn't really about the race, she still did mention them to prove that she's had it harder than them, which is just, as this person said, observably untrue. Now, my personal opinion, I don't believe she wrote it with the intention of singling out black artists and just sparking a ton of black outrage. My personal opinion, I do think she mentioned them on purpose to spark general outrage. That way we would be doing things like making really long videos about her, in which we also mentioned that she's releasing an album on September 5th. Every single article that mentioned her and this post mentioned that her album was coming out on September 5th. She just got free promo just by being messy. Like, if you really think about it, why would she not do that on purpose? So, was Lana Del Rey profiting off of Black Outrage to sell her album? Yes. Now, I know you're thinking, you just said she didn't do it on purpose. And no, I don't think she did it on purpose. But once she realized who she was making mad and that it was getting her even more attention than she initially was looking for, bruh, she made 4 follow-up comments. 4. And they were all about the outrage part of it. I'm gonna read parts of these comments out, and I'm just gonna be honest, this is where my respect for her started to dip, because holy crap, man, just listen. To be clear, because I know you love to twist things, I love these singers and know them. Hashtag that is why I mentioned them. I would also like to have some of the same freedom of expression without judgment of hysteria. And it's kind of like, if you know we love to twist things, why wouldn't you mention that in the post that you're bringing them up as positive examples, even though you were describing them negatively? Maybe because if you did that, then we wouldn't be having this conversation now would we? I haven't had the same opportunity to express what I wanted to express without being completely decimated. The same opportunity as Beyonce. Beyonce, sweetie, I'm so sorry. Beyonce got blamed on national TV for teen pregnancy. And if we're just talking about criticism from like the feminist space, like Lana was allegedly doing, Beyonce's album Lemonade sparked a discussion in the feminist community among some of the top scholars there about, and I quote, the perception of femme women, those who, like Beyonce, present themselves as traditionally feminine in the Black feminist movement. In other words, Beyonce has gone through the literal exact same thing you're complaining about in the post. So the fact that you brought her up to prove that you have it harder is just, it's not just tone deaf. At some point, it just starts bordering on delusion. If you want to say that has something to do with race, that's your opinion, but that's not what I was saying. Okay, that's fair. She should have left it at that. I think that's a fair response to accusations of that, but no, of course she didn't. This is the problem with society today. Not everything is about whatever you want it to be. It's exactly the point of my post. There are certain women that culture doesn't want to have a voice. It may not have to do with race, but I don't know what it has to do with. I don't care anymore, but don't ever, bro, call me racist, because that is BS. So, don't ever call me racist is hands down the single most disappointing reaction to accusations of racism just in the book. You're basically expressing that you're more upset about the fact that somebody called you racist than the possibility that you could have unintentionally made people think that you were racist. So that's interesting. But wait, there's more. And my last and final note on everything, when I said people who look like me, I meant the people who don't look strong or necessarily smart or like they're in control, etc. It's about advocating for a more delicate personality, not for white women. Thanks for the Karen comments though, very helpful. I mean, first of all, literally imagine being upset over the Karen meme. But on a more serious note, when you use the words people who look and act like me, then people are going to assume you're talking about physical appearance, because if you were just talking about people who act like you, then why did you go out of your way to make the distinction that you're also talking about people who look like you? There's no flattering way of interpreting this. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really sitting here trying to make excuses for this person, but at this point, it's either one of two things. She meant something, got backlash, and then pretended that she meant something else, which is super disappointing, or she's just so incredibly bad at expressing opinions in a public space that this is how much room people had to misinterpret what she was saying because she worded it so terribly. In other words, she's either just like a bad person or a bad writer, and she's going with the bad writer angle. She's going with the bad writer angle in the same breath that she's announcing a new poetry book. So can't wait to read that. Actually, if this video gets any amount of likes at all, over 0, then I will purchase Lana Del Rey's poetry book and read it. Can we get 1 like? That'll be crazy. I don't know if we can do it, guys. So you know how she said, I don't care anymore, and this is my last and final note on everything? After that, she released another statement, an entire statement on Instagram. Can you say desperation. But she has an album to promote, so honestly, can you blame her? I mean, yes, you can, and I will. As disappointing as her follow-up statements were, just this final statement was the nail in the coffin for me. A couple of final notes on my controversial post that is not controversial at all. So now we're just lying. It literally was controversial. Like, even if she somehow wasn't trying to start drama, it got national news coverage. That's called controversy. It reminds me of like the fake apologies. It reminds me of like the fake apologies I would do when I was a kid and I thought I was so smart. Like, I would throw a ball in someone's direction, like with the intention of them catching it, but then it would hit them in the face, right? And the teacher made me apologize, but I was just so offended that you would make me apologize for something that I wasn't intending. So I was very intentional with my apology. Oh, sorry I threw that ball and they hit you in the face, even though it didn't hurt. And like, I really thought I showed them. Like, I thought I was the wittiest person on planet Earth, when in reality, I was just mad over nothing. Despite the feedback I've heard from several people that I mentioned in a complimentary way, whether it be Ariana Grande or Doja Cat, I want to say that I remain firm in my clarity and stance, and that what I was writing about was the importance of self-advocacy for the more delicate and often dismissed softer female personality, and that there does have to be room for that type in what will inevitably become a new wave / third wave of feminism that is rapidly approaching. Watch. So she didn't mention those women to stir up drama, but now she's going public with the information that Ariana Grande privately contacted her and expressed unhappiness with her post. Because that's not going to cause any drama. Also, imagine saying, I remain firm in my clarity, when the reason you're in hot water is just because of how decidedly unclear your original post was. And that third wave of feminism she's talking about, it started almost 20 years ago, and it took me almost 20 seconds to Google that before saying it just now. So she's mad that feminism doesn't have space for her, but she doesn't even know what feminism is. That's like calling out your friend publicly, just like, you refuse to compromise. When will you admit that there's not enough space in your house for me to live there and be happy? And your friend's just like, my house? You don't live there, and you've never even been to my house. Like, you don't know what it looks like. Perhaps I could have given more context to my post by mentioning the title of the second book that would be out next March, called Behind the Iron Gates: Insights from an Institution. Now, how in the world would that give us more context to her terrible post? The only context that gives me is that she's read Sylvia Plath at least once. Also, nice book plug. Again, I'm sorry that the folks who I can only assume are super Trump / Pence supporters or hyper liberals or flip-flopping headline grabbing critics can't read and want to make it a race war, when in fact the issue was with female critics and female alternative artists who are dissociated from their own fragility and sexuality and berate more sexually liberated artists like myself and the women I mentioned. Alright, so this just makes me not upset, but like tired. First of all, calling some tweets and Instagram comments a race war when you can look around and see what's happening in the world today, that's beyond disappointing. And you know what? I don't think she's being insensitive. I think she's being inflammatory. And there's a big difference. I think at this point, she's just trying to make people mad. Like, if you're trying to dispel something, do you think that's gonna work by calling people Trump supporters and or hyper liberals? Like, what? That's such an immature and intellectually weak response to criticism. Like, instead of sorry, she's like, sorry that you're a Trump supporter and you're turning it into a literal race war. And I think on another level, instead of just accepting that people are allowed to have a different opinion than she does about these issues, she's like, sorry that you're too dissociated from your own fragility and you're just mad at me because I'm more liberated than you. Like, what in the pretentious is happening? Lana Del Rey let that Grammy go to her head, and she didn't even win it. But in truth, making it about race says so much more about you than it does about me. You want the drama. You don't want to believe that a woman could be beautiful and strong and fragile at the same time, loving and all-inclusive, by making personal reparations simply for the joy of doing it. We want the drama, said the person who made an entire unprompted Instagram statement, and then 4 follow-up statements. And then another follow-up statement on Instagram. Literally all of which just proceeded to cause more and more drama. But nope, we just hate women apparently. Good to know, because personally I had no idea, but You can learn new things about yourself every day. Nothing new here in your reaction. Same as 10 years ago when a million think pieces came out about me feigning emotional fragility or lying about coming from no money when that was the truth. My aim and my message are clear, that I have control of my own story. If the women I mentioned don't want to be associated with me, that's absolutely fine with me. And that was her statement, her final statement, after her other final statement. After the 3 other statements after her first statement. And then she made a video, and no, I'm not kidding. Alright, so for the final part of this video, in this 6-minute video of hers that I cut down to 4.5 minutes because, you know, editing, Lana Del Rey proceeds to make things even worse. Don't ask how, just observe.
Hey, so I don't want to beat a dead horse and I don't want to, you know, go on and on about this post thing, but
Are you sure about that?
I just want to remind you in that post, my one and only personal declaration I've ever made, thanks for being so warm and welcoming, you know, was about the need for fragility in the feminist movement. It's gonna be important. And when I mentioned women who look like me, I didn't mean white like me. I mean the kind of women who other people might not believe because they think, oh, well, look at her, she deserves it or whatever.
Then maybe that's what she should have said in her original post. It's just a suggestion. I don't have like a PR degree. What do I know? Honestly though, I don't want to lecture on feminism or what we need in feminism from somebody who doesn't know what wave of feminism we're on.
There's a lot of people like that, you know. I just think it's sad that the women I mentioned about, you know, whether they sing about dancing for money or whatever, the same stuff, by the way, that I've been singing about and chronicling for 13 years. That's why I'm in that echelon. Yes, they are my friends and peers and contemporaries. The difference is when I get on the pole, people call me a whore. But when Twigs gets on the pole, it's art.
Okay, so now we're comparing ourselves to FKA Twigs. I'm so tired. First of all, I've found people making disparaging remarks about FKA Twigs' pole dancing in the comment section of Twigs' own videos, so to pretend like she doesn't get called names as well is just... Also, since we're here, I just have to point out, Twigs did so much more for that video than you did. It's like comparing apples to apple seeds. And what I still fail to understand throughout all of this from the very beginning of her first statement is why it has to be a comparison at all. Why does it have to be that Twigs had it so much easier than you, even though you know she didn't? Like, why do you have to believe that? Lana Del Rey wants to be the less fortunate person and she's playing the victim. I don't know why I'm trying to word it so weirdly. Why are we playing the victim?
I'm reminded constantly by my friends that lyrically there are layers and complicated psychological, you know, factors that play into some of my songwriting. But I just want to say the culture is super sick right now, and the fact that they want to turn my posts, my advocacy for fragility into a race war, it's really bad. It's actually really bad.
You know what's actually really bad and super sick? Actual race wars. Getting dragged on Twitter is just like another Monday. I've been dragged on Twitter. It sucks, I will admit, but I hate to be that person. You can log off Twitter, you know what I mean, my guy? Like, we can't log out of a race war, Lana.
Especially when in that same declaration, I was talking again about the idea of how important it is to make reparations to the Navajo community because they touched me so much in my youth, that I believe in personal reparations because it's the right thing to do. And, you know, I think what's really sad is, like, as a personal advocate, as a girl's girl, as somebody who wants the best for every culture, you know, when Marianne Williamson was talking about reparations to the black community that never got done during the emancipation period, that was why I liked her, because I always felt that way.
There it is, folks. It's really bad that I'm being called racist, especially since I've donated money to Native American. I knew that's why she mentioned it at the end of the post. I've seen it too much. I knew that's why she brought it up at the end of her last post, so she could fall back on that if anything happened to her. Like, when I look at it in hindsight, everything is just so clear to me. Also, I like how she didn't go the I have black friends route. She instead went the I follow somebody who has talked about black people before. We're evolving. Devolving. That's the word I'm looking for.
So I just want to say to all of the other women out there who are like me, good girls, good intentioned, who get f***ed up the ass constantly by the culture, just because you know, say what you really mean. I'm with you, I feel for you, and I know that you feel for me, and I'm super strong. You can call me whatever.
You know those girls. The good ones that everyone misunderstands, like me, because we're not like other girls. Also, I don't doubt that she's super strong, because you kind of have to be to purposely invite this kind of storm into your life. But I will say she does seem super bothered. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 posts, 2 of which were supposed to be your final post, and then a whole video to finish that off. That's not really the mark of somebody who's unbothered and doesn't care, but what would I know?
I'm sorry that I didn't add one Caucasian, 100% Caucasian person into the mix of the women that I admire, but it really says more about you than it does about me. And I think that what's interesting is the very first time I decided to tell you anything about my life, or the fact that I'm writing books that chronicle that fragility, 200,000 hateful, spiteful comments come in. My phone number leaked. Comments like, you f***ing white bitch. It's the opposite of the spirit of an advocate. It's what causes fragility.
There were not 200,000 hateful comments on her post. Of course, there were some hateful comments, and there was name calling, but you're gonna get that just by breathing on the internet. But to group all of the criticism you're receiving in the same box as the people who leaked your phone number and were calling you names, that way you don't have to address any of it at all. She must be a YouTube fan. She watches YouTube. I know she's taking notes from our apology videos at this point. She just removed the apology itself, and honestly, that's kind of genius. Just the dishonesty, super cringy. But this is the same person who says she had it harder than Beyonce. So what did we expect at this point?
But it's not gonna stop me, period. So I just want to say, nobody gets to tell your story except for you. And even if that means it's kind of messy like this along the way, because unfortunately when you have a good heart, it doesn't always shine through, and you trudge on anyway. You make those personal reparations to heal your own family karmic lineage and the sickness of this country.
She said, period. Nobody's gonna stop me. Period.
But it's not gonna stop me. Period.
Period.
Domestic abuse, mental health problems is the second epidemic that's arising out of this pandemic. It's a real thing. That's what I was talking about. As ever, I'm grateful that my muse is still here, and that I have, over the last 3 years, been blessed to have the insight and ability to channel 2 books worth of beautiful poems. And I think my new record, Chemtrails Over the Country Club, is special as well.
So she's finally announced the album name. I can't lie, Chemtrails Over the Country Club sounds like exactly what I would name a Lana Del Rey parody song if I was making one.
Sorry that a couple of the girls I talked to, who were mentioned in that post, have a super different opinion of my insight, and especially because we've been so close for so long. But it really, again, makes you reach into the depth of your own heart and say, well, am I good intentioned? And of course, for me, the answer is always yes. I barely ever share a thing. And this is why.
Why do you never share things? Because you're bad at it? Like, honestly, this idea that everyone hates Lana Del Rey and we're just here to pick apart everything she's saying and spin it into some negative thing is not true. You can go into her comment section and see that she gets overwhelming support on most of her ventures. You can go into the criticism she was getting and see that there's a lot of people still defending her because they saw the good points. You can look at this video in which I can see that there is a lot of good points in her original statement. It was just kind of buried under a lot of things that didn't need to be there.
And the reason why I'm making this post, and I know it seems a bit much, right? But there are women out there like me who have so much to give and don't quite get to the place spiritually or karmically where they're supposed to be because there are other women who hate them and try and take them down, whether in my case it's certain alternative singers or malintended journalists or men who hate women. But I'm not the enemy, and I'm definitely not racist, so don't get it twisted. Nobody gets to tell your story except for you. That's what I'm gonna do in the next couple of books. So God bless, and off if you don't like the post.
Wow. 3 out of 10. This video gets a 3 out of 10 for me. It would be a 0 out of 10, but I must be honest, I did derive some sick entertainment value out of just the blatant dishonesty and how she said period. That was really funny, like unironically. All right, so in conclusion, my thoughts on Lana Del Rey have not changed. In fact, I don't even think she's a bad person. Like, it's not the vibe I was getting. Now, I will be honest. There is now a bit of a disconnect in my head when I think about her because I didn't think she was this kind of person. But you got to do what you got to do for album sales, I guess. I think if you had asked me before this, I would have just said she's chill. But now I have the knowledge that Lana Del Rey is kind of ruthless in her pursuit of getting people to talk about her, and she doesn't seem to care who gets angry in the process or even if what she's saying is right. So that's a lot. It's kind of iconic, but it's also kind of ironic because if anyone's music is strong enough to stand on its own without needing the drama stirring and the inflammatory comments, I really would have thought it would be Lana Del Rey. But ultimately, I'm still going to be streaming her album on September 5th. Like, she might be bad at all of this, and she might really hold some really problematic views, but that does not change the fact that her last album slapped. So who cares?